Welcome back to Homestead Development. Today we're going to be erecting our metal building. We start by measuring the slab and making sure that it is the correct dimensions. Then we pop some string lines so that we know where the base rail should end up. Next, we will drill holes in the base plate for our anchor bolts. Once we set the base plate in place, we will go ahead and hammer drill into the concrete and set our concrete anchors. As you anchor the base rail down, you can tap it with a hammer to make sure that it is in the correct location. So they're anchoring down the base rails with these little concrete anchors. This is a wedge style anchor. So they drill the hole, they hammer this down in there. So as this nut goes down, it pulls this bolt up. And this little sleeve right here has ridges on it. So this sleeve stays put in the concrete, and then this nodule right here pushes up into it and expands. And that compression is what holds this together. Next, we get our trusses laid out and ready to be stood up. Go ahead and attach the legs with the provided screws, and then attach the braces from the legs to the truss. Next, we're going to put the sheet metal on the end caps of the trusses. You can roughly cut and screw the metal to the end caps. Use a string line to make sure that all your screws are in the center of the square tubing. Next, flip the truss over and cut off the excess metal. You'll see that there are screws placed in the top of the truss. These screws mark the location for the hat channel. Once all the trusses are up, you will simply be able to set the hat channel on top and slide it down to the screw and then screw it into the correct location. Then you can remove those excess screws. Now let's go ahead and stand up all of our trusses. We'll start with one of the end trusses with the sheet metal facing outwards. Once that first truss is up, go ahead and put a brace on it to keep it square and level. Next, continue putting all of the trusses up. Now we're setting in place the last end truss with the sheet metal facing outwards. Now we're installing the base plate on each end of the metal building. Make sure the inside of the base plate lines up with the blue chalk line. Measuring from the top down on each corner leg, mark a similar height. Ours is 64 inches. Then you can use a laser level to set all 4 corners at the same height. Attach a string line and adjust the height of each leg so that the same measurement from the top down is at the same height on the string line. This will assure that your building is level. If you do not have a laser level, you can use a 3-foot level on the hat channel in between each truss and work your way down the building. You'll see here that we use a block and an extra post to lift up some of these posts and make sure that they are at the correct height. At this point, we're going to start preparing the hat channel for the roof. We set it against the bottom of the trusses and mark out each truss location. That way, when we set it on the roof, all we have to do is line up the marks with the trusses and screw them in. This saves us a lot of time and measurement while we're on top of the roof. Now we will begin installing the first hat channel on each side. Set the hat channel on top, slide it down to the edge, and use the marks that we placed earlier to line it up with the trusses. Screwing in this first hat channel will actually help square all of the trusses of the building. Our building has a 6-inch overhang on both ends. Sometimes you'll need to adjust the truss a little bit to get it to fall within the lines, but this is good as it helps square up the truss and make sure that they have the proper spacing. Now we will simply set the hat channel on the screws that we placed earlier. Once they are set in place, go ahead and screw them in. Now we will place all of the vertical posts on both of the end walls. In our building, we set a post every 5 feet. We attach the post at the top and bottom with 90-degree angle brackets and screws. At this point, we will use ratchet straps to rack the building and make sure that our framing is square and plumb. Once the building is square and plumb, we go ahead and start attaching the siding. The siding will lock the building in and keep it from shifting once the straps are removed. We are not putting all of the screws in just yet. You can see that we are putting screws on the corners and down the center. We will come back later and place the rest of the screws. The last piece of siding goes on the bottom. We cut each piece to fit nicely into the brick ledge at the bottom. It's a good idea to periodically check and make sure that your building is still square as you're putting your sheeting on, and especially before you attach roofing panels. Next, we'll set the door in place, make sure it is nice and level, and make sure that it is even with the structural framing on the outside. Next, we'll put our header in and attach it with angle brackets and screws. Then we'll put the side post on and attach it with angle brackets and screws as well. At this point, I must recommend that you leave at least 1/4 to 1/2 inch on the side of your door to that side post. That way you'll have space to shim your door later and make sure that it opens and closes properly. For now, we just attached one screw on each side of the door to hold it in place. Next, we attach the J-channel trim, and then we can continue putting the siding on the building. I'm going to be purchasing and installing residential style windows into this metal building later, so stay tuned for another video and I'll explain how to do that. As the last of the siding is going into place, we get prepared to install roofing panels. As we set roofing panels in place, we place screws at the very top hat channel and also the second from the bottom hat channel. We don't place screws in the very bottom hat channel because we still have to come back and place eave trim. Once all of the panels are in place, we start putting trim on and then attaching the remainder of the screws. Alright, so unfortunately we lost all the footage of the guys installing the trim, so I'm just going to talk about it instead. So the first piece of trim that they install is the corner trim all the way around the building. Obviously there's one piece that goes on each corner. You simply set the corner trim in place and you pop a screw in every other ridge on the siding panel. This corner trim tidies up where the two side panels come in and hides that seam. The trim that they use is long on one side and short on the other, so they only screw to the long side. If you have trim that is wide on both sides, you're going to want to put a screw on both sides in the ridges. So the next piece of trim that they installed was the eave trim. That's the trim that goes down both long sides of the building, here in the front and in the back. When we installed the roofing panels, the reason that I said to leave the first row of screws out was so that you could push this roofing panel up and slide this trim between it and the structural framing. So once you slide that in, you simply pop a screw in every location straight up where you have structural framing. So then you overlap the trim a little bit, 6 inches to a foot, and you just go all the way down the side. So once you have it all screwed in from underneath, you come back, make sure this is pushed all the way in, and you put the remainder of your roofing screws in, which secures this in place. So the next trim that's installed is the gable trim. The gable trim is on the gable ends of the building, which is the ends that come up and form a point. So on this side and the other side of the building is the gable trim. So the gable trim installs much the same way as the eave trim, except on this, you need to make sure that you make your cuts in your corners, and in the center, you need to make your plumb cut, that way you have a nice transition. So the very last trim that is installed is the ridge cap, which goes down the center of the roof along the ridge, and it hides the two joints where the ends of the roofing panels meet up. It covers that up, you screw it in at every other ridge, just like the corner trim, and then it overlaps on the outside of the gable trim. On this building, they just simply folded it down and screwed it in, or you could have it come out about 1 inch, just to keep the water away from your vertical cut at the center of your gable trim. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned for future videos. We're going to be installing residential windows in this building, and then we're going to frame out the inside to get all of our rooms and our bathrooms situated. So stay with us on our journey, continue to learn with us, and I'll see you on the next one.